Hey everybody, we are going to jump into Buddhism. And you can't do Buddhism without jumping into our buddy Siddhartha Gautama. And he was from the country of Nepal in about like 563 to 483 BCE. He was raised a Hindu and he read all the holy books and participated in all the Hindu rituals. He was a prince who had very little knowledge of the outside world, kind of like Jasmine from Aladdin, where she wasn't allowed out of the palace. This was the same kind of deal for our boy Gautama. Now, one day he goes out and he sees things that bother him. First of all, he sees a very old man, a very sick man who's just died, a wandering monk. Now, the first three sorrowed him, and he wondered, well, why do people get old? Why do they get sick? And why did they die? And he decided he was going to become a monk to go and answer these questions. So he took off his royal garments and he put on this faded orange robe and he shaved his head, and out he went. So what did he find? He wandered around for like 6 years and one night, so the story goes. And under a full moon, he stops to rest under a fig tree. And he said, I'm not moving until I found my answers. And he sat there and he closed his eyes and meditated and then began practicing some yoga. And he concentrated on the Hindu teachings and he thought about the endless cycle of death and rebirth. And he thought about human pain and suffering. And during this meditation, he has this revelation, a divine understanding that seems to explain everything to him. And his real gestalt, his moment of clarity, was that people could find an end to suffering. And this is what's known as the Enlightenment. And upon this experience, Siddhartha becomes traditionally known as the Buddha. This is when we stop talking about him as Siddhartha Gautama and start referring to him as the Buddha, which Buddha means one who is awake. And so when he has this gestalt, this moment of enlightenment, that is what we're talking about. Now, here is what we're talking about. This is he believed that all people could achieve enlightenment. This wasn't something that was unique to him. He believed that detachment, feeling freeing yourself from all the worldly desires, was important. And according to Joseph Campbell, this is recognizing your connection to the transcendent while you're in the field of time. The transcendent exists in you and the world around you. And many religions have slightly different ways of verbalizing this. We even see this in Christianity, where you see the Holy Spirit is the presence of God in the world that lives in our conscience. And our goal is to seek out the voice of the Holy Spirit that lives in our conscience to live a good life. And what's interesting is that in Buddhism, the Buddha's way to enlightenment was to seek the wisdom that lies within. And for Christians, our goal too is to seek the Holy Spirit, which in the scriptures is also referred to as wisdom. So Christians are looking to find the wisdom that's within the same way as Buddhists go. It's so fascinating to find religions that were created on opposite parts of the world without any contact with one another, coming up with the same ideas. It's super cool to do. It's kind of like you're kind of on the right path, right? You know you're on the right path if others are doing it like you. That doesn't mean I have to like scrap what I'm doing and go and be a Buddhist. What it means is it gives confirmation to me that the path I'm on must be right because people are in the other part of the world are coming up with the same kind of answer. It's really cool. So now, Buddha's understanding of suffering and detachment, all the teachings of Buddhism is called Dharma. Now, here we want to talk about the Four Noble Truths, and this really is the center of Buddhism. If you're going to remember anything from any of these slides, and you want to have that 5 minute conversation with somebody about Buddhism, this is what you want to kind of understand. This is the money slide. The Four Noble Truths um, can be summed up. All of Buddha's teachings can be summed up here. The first is that all lives are filled with suffering or loss. Life always involves suffering, but even when things seem good, We lose the option of one thing because we're doing another, right? We are on a timeline, and I'm here with you talking this video out, and I could be like hanging out with my kids or going and drinking some beer or whatever I wanted to do, cut the grass. I don't know. Um, so I'm losing those opportunities. So all life is a loss, right? And the things that we have in our world, our possessions, those are things that are losable. The second thing is suffering comes from a desire for worldly things. The cause of suffering is a belief in the necessity of possession. I have to have stuff. I have to have control. We suffer because we mistaken our belief that we're separate, independent, solid I. You know, it's the painful and futile struggle to maintain this delusion of our ego and its value that causes the suffering and the pain. That I am special, right? That I am somehow better or more than, or I have to be my own. I have to, you have to be yourself and you have to be proud. Like that sense of having to have possession, even possession of yourself, causes suffering. Now, suffering, the third part of the Noble Truths, suffering ends when desire ends. The good news is that our possessions and our suffering that they cause are temporary. They're like passing clouds that obscure the sun of our enlightened nature, which is always present, right? So suffering can end because our obscurations can be purified, and an awakened mind is always available to us. So it's understanding the transcendent, right? Think about that. Is like if we understand who we are, not as individuals, but as collective connections to the transcendent, to wisdom, then we won't have to worry about that. Now, I mean, that means that um, all possessions hold us back. Now, some people say, well, I'm not going to be poor, and I'm not going to just give my car away. And it's not necessarily that. It's not that you can't have a car. It's that you can't let the car possess you, right? So if the car is somehow holding you back from being happy, from living a life of value, then yeah, that car is a possession that is causing suffering, right? Um, and the last of the Four Noble Truths is that people can learn to end desire by following 8 rules, known as the Eightfold Path. So by living ethical life, practicing meditation, and developing wisdom, we can go ahead and follow the path to enlightenment the way the Buddha did. So this is really the key to Buddhism, these Four Noble Truths. Now, 8 rules of the noble eightfold path: right understanding, right intentions, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. In the end, it's just living a good life. Now, nirvana, this is something that happens when one is completely released from suffering. It's so different from everyday life that Buddha, could not describe it. And so Buddhism does not try to describe what nirvana is, whether or not it's a heaven or some kind of state of, of mind. Remember that the key focus of Buddhism is not some kind of God, not some kind of deity. It is the wisdom that lies within us and is central to our understanding of that we are spiritual beings and we are more than just the existence that we uh, our physical bodies on this timeline. So we'll come back and jump on to the next video of Buddhism.